I failed my last project, so I have to do a resit. To keep track of my process, I decided to record and turn it into a video. Now you might be asking, what is this project? So I will tell you what I told my professor. During the next 2 weeks, I will be doing extensive research on how artists use layers to further teach myself about the subject, as well as try out and experiment with these said techniques. In the end, I want to be able to create a way to share everything I've learned throughout the process with you and everyone else. My goals for the project, based on the criticism I previously got, was 1. Make the reasons for my idea, which is layering, clear, not just visually, but also conceptually. 2. Describe what and how someone can use this idea. And 3. Make it as clear as possible. I began by defining what layering actually is. The Oxford Languages Dictionary defines the noun layer as 1. A sheet, quantity or thickness of material, typically one of several, covering a surface or body. 2. A person or thing that lays something. And the verb layer as 1. Arrange in a layer or layers. 2. Propagate a plant as a layer. But how do I personally understand layers? Well, it's adding one type of an element or item onto a design. And how do I use them? I apply different elements to my designs digitally, as well as I distort them sometimes by using filters. I started by doing my research on different ways that layers can be used in art, and what artists are seen using them. Mark Rothko and how he layered different colors of paint over each other multiple times to create movement. Bernard Praw, who placed objects at different distances, which resulted in an image formed by the said object when viewed from a specific distance. A paper cutout effect that many artists are seen using, but I chose Anna Skuratova. The technique involves layering different colored shapes over each other to create depth. Fashion, where clothing can be layered onto each other to change the way one's body looks, as well as emphasize its shape. Ricardo Lete, who has taken an image and distorted it by scanning it in a printer. Adobe Illustrator, where layering is a basic function. It allows for certain elements of a design like background and text to be adjusted as a group. Will Atwood, who uses resin pour as a technique for his layering. In between pouring layers of resin, he paints on top of each layer individually. It creates depth and a 3D looking object by 2D paintings. I even went as far as to look at layering and writing, where you write different parts of the story in the order of dialogue, setting, action, reaction, centrality, and description. Next, I went on to experiment with a few of these techniques. I tried using Mark Rothko's painting technique. I didn't have oil colors, nor would I have had the patience to wait for them to dry, so I used acrylic paints instead. I also wanted to see how his technique would compare to a painting where I purely used one single color of paint for each zone. I was able to see that when I used only 3 different colors for the whole piece, it looked very plain, but when I used Rothko's technique for the painting, it made it more intriguing and complex. Even though it might not have turned out exactly as great as the work the artist does, I was still able to see an effect by using his technique. I then went on to achieve depth in a digital space. I created a few designs in Illustrator, which ended up looking pretty interesting. In a space that's 2D, I was able to achieve depth and make it look 3D. This also made me want to try and create a design or two in a physical form. From the colors I had, I placed the darkest color in the very back to show that it is the deepest spot in the design. The rest of the cutout bits I used to create a different design where the darkest color is at the top. The shapes I used were very organic, as I wanted the design to look more natural and emphasize the color that I used. It ended up looking pretty cool because you can play with the light to change the way the shadow falls, as well as you get to see how deep and thick the piece actually is. Next on my list was trying to achieve paint suspended in midair. Might seem impossible, but with resin pour, it looks pretty believable. Although I couldn't get my hands on the material, I used plastic sheets, which sorta gave the right look. Perhaps it would have worked better if I placed the sheets with lines and circles higher above each other. I would have had better results. I tried using clear glue to mimic the resin, but I only got as far as 2 layers of paint and 2 layers of glue. I didn't account for each layer of glue to take a full day to dry, for them to have an incredible amount of bubbles, and as for long as the glue is drying, it shrinks, which caused the paint to move and shrivel. In the end, I had to give up on the idea, because everything ended up going left instead of right. I had previously attempted my 4th experiment, which is scanning a photo in a printer. In my case, it was a group of brown squares. Because squares are a very basic shape, I found that this layering technique fit the example perfectly. Because the scanning technique brings a unique look to design or a photo, I liked that I had applied it to a bunch of basic squares. It made them look unique and stretched a few of them out to being unrecognizable. Quite ironic, I must say. I did manage to make cards which contain all the research and everything I found out through my experimenting, but they do contain everything I told you in this video, so if you want the physical form or the PDF, email me. Thank you for your attention.